It all started with a sheet of foam board and a question. What if the Joker worked at IKEA? So, that's what I'm building today. By the time we're done, there'll be tiny furniture and blood on the break room floor. But first, the foundation. But to paint a madman, you have to become one. So after the nightmare of building the floor, I sanded it and gave it a nice coat of oil. Spoiler alert, oil and paper didn't play nice together, but not in the way you might think. This was the first mistake. More of that in a little bit. I also painted the walls white to make it feel less like a school project and more realistic. You know, to give it some texture. A day later, the glue underneath had completely let go of the paper on the floor. So I just peeled the whole paper thing off the foam board so I could mount it properly on thicker foam. A bit of a detour, but it worked. With the floor done, I moved on to mounting it onto a foam base. I bought a thick piece of foam without much research. Probably not the best choice, to be honest. The finer grid foam would have made things easier, but I didn't really know that existed. Still, it worked. I marked out the size I needed, cut it to shape, and started sanding down the edges. Just enough to smooth out any rough cuts and get everything a bit cleaner before gluing. Then I added edge strips around the whole base, partly to make it look more finished, partly to hide the crimes I committed with a knife because I don't own a foam cutter. With the base sorted, I started working on the lighting. Tiny wall spotlights made from brass rod and bits of plastic with a LED inside. Simple setup, but they ended up looking surprisingly legit. To get them lined up properly, I used a laser level, because once you glue crooked lights, you can't unsee them, and neither can the comments section. Let's paint the star of the show, the madman himself. I'm not going to dive into every layer and highlight here, but if you're curious about how I paint my models, I've got a bunch of other videos that go way deeper into that side of things. And if you ever want feedback, tips, or just a place to share your own crazy projects, the Discord is open, the link's down in the description. I wanted this build to feel like one of those weird crossovers no one asked for, the Joker and IKEA. But the more I worked on it, the more it made sense. You just know he's the guy who spends 3 hours rearranging the showroom, opens every fake drawer, finds a plastic phone, and uses it to prank call Batman. And if you've ever tried building a flat pack cabinet without losing your mind, maybe you understand him a little better now. Somewhere between the tiny plants and meatballs, he's hiding, smiling, waiting, probably folding bath towels wrong on purpose. While the Joker dried, I moved on to prepping the body bag. It's 3D printed, and like most prints, it had a few gaps and layer lines to clean up. To fill them in, I mixed some resin with baby powder. It makes a kind of paste that's easy to push into the holes to cure and sand. Once that's done, I hit it with a coat of flat black from a rattle can. It's supposed to be black, so I didn't need any extra color here. Then I focused on the ropes. I started with a solid white base coat just to make sure the brown speed paint would actually show up. Otherwise it just disappears into the black and I'd have to paint 675 layers of that brown. I dry brushed the whole bag with a dark grey. It's a quick way to bring out the texture and give it that worn plastic look without having to paint every wrinkle by hand. After that, it was just a matter of adding some layers of brown speed paint over the ropes. It settles into the fibers and gives it that old, stained look. Every IKEA scene needs a stylish lamp, so I did what any professional would do and went to the hardware store to scavenge plumbing parts. This brass lid looked close enough to a lamp base. I sanded it down off camera. Just imagine some elegant spinning and grinding noises. Then I drilled a hole through the center so I could fit in a brass rod. Classic IKEA, really. If it's shiny and vaguely lamp-shaped, it counts. And hey, if you want to see more of my strange successes and glorious failures, or even vote on what cursed project I build next, check out the Patreon. It helps a lot and you get to peek behind the scenes too. Now, I had dreams of building a beautiful wireframe lampshade by hand. I bent 2 rings out of wire and tried to connect them with thin steel wire. It looked like something you'd find in a broken umbrella. I cut little grooves into the rod so I could glue in the crossbars. That part actually worked pretty well. The problem was the rest of it. Like every great inventor, I skipped that problem and started working on something else with the hopes that the first problem would solve itself. The wiring was more fun. I twisted 2 wires to make some kind of lamp wire. The first problem did not solve itself. I know. Shocker. So I tried thicker wire instead, thinking I could wrap the LED noodle around it, but it turned into this wobbly disaster that couldn't hold its shape at all. After way too much fiddling, I just said, heck with it, let's 3D model and print this damn thing. If you've come this far, the video is worth a little like, right? So after my wireframe dreams went full spaghetti, I just modeled the whole lampshade structure myself. Crossbars, rings, everything. And if you want to try it yourself, you can grab the files over in the Discord. To get light into this IKEA nightmare, I wire wrapped a tiny LED noodle and glued it into the inner circle. If you want a deeper dive into how I do this fiddly stuff, check out my other video in the corner or in the description after you watch this one. Once the noodle was behaving, I glued the lampshade onto the brass rod body. And now we had ourselves a lamp, kind of. It doesn't look very much like a lamp, yet. Now came the part that looked simple, but wasn't, adding the actual lampshade material. I didn't want it to look like plastic, I wanted that soft, modern, cozy IKEA glow, so I went with a textured paper. It had this nice subtle grain, almost fabric-like. The catch? It was a nightmare to cut. I tried using a knife, but the paper just frayed and dragged, so I had to go old school and use scissors to shape the paper. But once glued in place, it immediately looked like a real lampshade. Soft, diffused light, subtle texture, and suddenly the whole build clicked together. Just a little detail left. I wanted the lamp to have its own off mode, so I gave it a home. I cut out a small circle of paper, glued a magnet to it, and placed a second magnet under the diorama floor, as I'll show you later in the video. Now the lamp can pop off and rest exactly where it belongs. Tidy and satisfying. This next part, yeah, it was an adventure all on its own, so I let the documentary crew take over.
Thank you, Ghost Hat. Here in the busy workshop, a rare creature begins an unusual task: building a tiny sofa. This builder has never done this before. Lucky for him, he found a helpful template from someone called Martin Goes Mini. Sounds important. First, he carefully cuts the paper shapes, then moves them onto foam board, the strong but tricky material that likes to bend when you don't want it to. After some wrestling, he glues the pieces together, creating the basic shape, the sofa's skeleton. Next comes the padding. Using the guides from the template, he gently traces each piece with a pencil. No drama, no disasters, just steady hands and scissors cutting the shapes out. These padding pieces are simple but essential. Even tiny furniture needs to feel soft and inviting. Once cut, the padding is glued onto the foam board frame, adding that important layer of comfort. Now comes the fabric, blue because it was there, and not because it matches anything. Using a hot glue gun, our builder sticks the fabric onto the foam. Hot glue, both friend and foe. It holds, but don't touch it. It doesn't look perfect, but in the world of DIY, good enough is a victory. Now we come to the pillows, a seemingly simple part of sofa making, but one that actually takes some care. First, 2 pieces of fabric are cut to size. This is careful work, but nothing too tricky. The pieces are then glued together along the edges, creating a small fabric pouch. It's important to avoid getting glue inside, or you'll end up with a stiff, unusable pillow, as if that would matter in this case. With the pillowcase ready, it's time to fill it with cotton stuffing. This is what gives the pillows their shape and softness. Some pillows end up a little lumpy or uneven, but that's perfectly normal. Handmade doesn't mean perfect. These tiny cushions, imperfect as they are, add a sense of comfort and completeness to the sofa, even if no miniature figure will ever truly rest upon them.
Thanks to the documentary crew for this cover. They are very passionate about the tiny sofa. Time for the fine art of IKEA, which sounds like an insult, but I promise it's not. I 3D printed these little frames and matched them with some iconic IKEA wall art, because even miniature psychos deserve affordable Swedish culture. Glued the pictures onto the frames, then backed them with a piece of paper just to make them sturdier. I thought about making tiny glass panes, but maybe in diorama number 2. For now, we're embracing that matte finish. Now, I finally got to the assembly of the electricity. I drilled a hole in the wall for the lamp cord and started to cut and drill out the hole for the battery case. And all those tiny foam bits from drilling the base? I swept them into an envelope, taped it to a handwritten letter, and mailed it to IKEA with the words, "This is your fault, explain." Still waiting for a reply. I wanted to make 2 holes, one for the magnet for the lamp and one for a magnetic switch. Yes, this tiny thing is the magnet switch. It works surprisingly well and has a lot of possibilities. I tried to solder the cord to the sensor, but I accidentally destroyed the sensor when I glued it. Who could have guessed that a tiny glass tube doesn't like being squished with metal pliers? It resulted in that I had to remove everything and come up with a new plan, and then I cut the cables too short. Brilliant. The solution ended up using a Wego connector instead. And when I tried to show it to the camera, I dropped the whole thing and broke it. Again. Luckily, the sensor survived this time. It was just a matter of gluing everything back together. One more time. Alright, on to the next part. This is where the fun begins, because nothing says home makeover like blood, everywhere. I mixed up a little cocktail, white and transparent resin with some red and brown alcohol ink, thick enough to look gooey, thin enough to run from the axe. Tested it on a leftover piece of the floor, just to make sure it didn't look like ketchup. Then I started with a former employee of the month photo, which just happens to be right where the axe is going. What a coincidence! I wanted it to look like the blood from the axe was dripping down over the frame. I cured the resin with a UV lamp and added some to the Joker's frame too, like he switched the pictures to take credit for the mess, just like an employee of the month would do. The axe got a little resin bloodbath too. After that, I glued the sofa in place and positioned the body bag so it's kind of hiding behind the shelf. I traced out where I wanted the blood to pool and started adding resin in thin layers. The resin doesn't like being rushed, and the wooden floor soaked it up like it had something to hide too, so I had to take it slow. Let it cure, build it up, then repeat. Finally, I added some blood to Joker himself and splattered a bit across the floor. Not too much, just enough to make it look like he walked away from something he probably shouldn't have enjoyed as much as he did. With everything in place and some details added, it was time for the final reveal. Behold!